What is the craziest misdiagnosis that you have heard about or experienced?
My GP said I was probably just tired and diagnosed me with fatigue. During the next 2 years, I lost the ability to walk and started shaking before I got diagnosed with Parkinson's. He thought it impossible to be my age and get it, so it never crossed his mind. Edit. I had symptoms at 29 but diagnosed with Parkinson's at 33.
My 17-year-old son had bloody stools for a few weeks. The doctor ran some tests and told him he was fine to go home and eat Raisin Bran. Turns out he had cancer in his colon, lymphoma, and it was very aggressive. He had to have emergency surgery that night. After the biopsy, the hospital called and said, "Good news, it's benign." 3 hours later, the doctor called and said, "Oops, sorry, actually it is cancer, and we have to do a colon resection," followed by a very aggressive chemotherapy regimen. Freaking roller coaster. Edit to add. That was 15 years ago, and he's doing great. Complete remission.
When I was in the Marines and in combat training at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina, shortly after basic training, I started noticing a pain in one of my feet. I was in a class at the time, and it progressively got worse as that class dragged on, and I mentioned it to a guy sitting next to me after he noticed me squirming around like I was uncomfortable. He happened to glance down and said, "Oh my God, dude, look at your foot." It was starting to swell so much that you could actually see it through the jungle boots I was wearing. I went to a corpsman, medic, to get it checked out, and it was so swollen by then that they had to cut the boot off. And I guess because my foot had swelled up so much the skin broke. But the wounds from where the skin broke looked like a snake bite. So the initial diagnosis made by the medic was that I had been bitten by a venomous snake. This is like 45 minutes to an hour after I first noticed pain. So the whole time the Humvee was taking me back to a hospital, we were out in the field at the time, which felt like an eternity. Even though it was racing at high speed on these dirt roads, I was thinking I was definitely going to die. Fortunately, at the hospital, it was diagnosed as cellulitis, a bacterial infection, which can be potentially serious too, but it felt like good news compared to a venomous snakebite. I probably got it from a blister from one of the mini humps, forced marches, we were doing, later getting exposed to swamp water. I started gaining 20 pounds a month, and multiple doctors told me I was eating too much. By the end, I could barely walk to the kitchen to get food or even stand up. I was down to less than 1,000 calories a day, and still gaining weight. I was finally hospitalized, and it was end-stage liver disease. The first night I was in the hospital, they stuck a huge needle in my abdomen and sucked out 10 liters of fluid. Over the next 6 months, I lost 150 pounds of fluid, 14 liters at a time, once a week. I eventually had a liver transplant. I was not a drinker, and there never was a diagnosis for why my liver failed.
I was diagnosed with BPD and severe anxiety, along with psychogenic non-epileptic seizures, basically seizures caused by anxiety and stress. I was having multiple seizures every day and had one so bad I wound up in the hospital after I couldn't stop seizing for 15 minutes. The doctors thought I was faking everything because of the BPD diagnosis until they did an EEG. Turns out I just have chronic high blood pressure, so high that it was giving me seizures. It's been 2 years I've been on beta blockers and I haven't had any attacks, and my BPD diagnosis was removed.
For years, doctors and teachers told me I was subconsciously faking sick because of twals, was afraid of school. I had an immunodeficiency.
My mom and teachers all thought I was faking severe stomach pains for over a year. I'd call home to be picked up because the pain was unbearable. One day, instead of going home, the school counselor took me into her office where my mom was waiting. They grilled me, trying to figure out who was bullying me so badly I wanted to leave school. The counselor even told me I was making myself an easy target for bullies, then sent me back to class while I was still in pain. I wasn't being bullied at the time. I have severe IBS combined with having little access to safe, not spoiled food.
I had stomach ulcers starting when I was 10. They didn't find out till I was 14, because faking it to get out of school and she's just lazy and doesn't want to do schoolwork, etc. They finally did an upper endoscopy and find, surprise, ulcers. Did they ask any questions as to why an elementary schooler has been getting ulcers for years? Number, here's medications. Go away.
All through high school and college, I had constant nose problems. They were diagnosed as sinus infections and allergies, so I was on every common allergy prescription out there. None of them ever seemed to make much of a difference. But that's what the family doctor said. I moved to a new city and went to a new doctor for something unrelated. I mentioned the long history of allergies, and he asked if I'd ever had a CT scan. First time that had ever been suggested to me. I had it done, and it showed that I had a severely deviated septum. One side of my nose had basically closed in on itself, creating a great environment for infections and making it harder to breathe. From the way it had healed, the doctor thought it was likely due to a broken nose when I was a kid. I'd never knowingly broken my nose, but I'd had a bike accident when I was 8, where I went over the handlebars and somehow got a cut on my nose in the process. I never quite figured out exactly how it got there or what it impacted, but was the only thing I could remember that involved my nose. There was no pain afterward or change in the exterior at all. One quick laparoscopic surgery, and a couple days with a very sensitive nose, and it was like night and day. Over a decade of sinus pain, headaches, struggling to breathe during school runs, and getting heckled about being out of shape or just trying to get out of it. And turns out I was working with half a functioning nose the entire time. Second opinions are your friend.
I had the starting symptoms of tonsillitis. I knew it was this, and I knew I was about to get so sick I wouldn't be able to stay awake longer than 20 mins, let alone see the doctor. So I went and asked for antibiotics. It's important to note that when I get tonsillitis, my entire body shuts down. All my glands come up, and I just sleep. So I go to the doctor, and he does an examination. Says my throat is only a little red ATM, and feels my abdomen, and feels a lump, and asks if it hurts when he pushes it. I say it hurts a little, but more like it's sort of more uncomfortable. He sends me straight to the ER with a note. I'm in there for hours. My temp skyrockets to 42 degrees Celsius. I'm delirious. They are doing all these tests, and I tell them it's tonsillitis. They don't believe me. They eventually think, since the test came back inconclusive, that I have appendicitis. The surgeon tells me he's the specialist, not me, and this can't possibly be tonsillitis. They take my appendix. The surgeon then yells at me for having to come in at 9:30 p.m. on a Tuesday night to take out a perfectly fine appendix. They then discover I do have tonsillitis. TLDR. My appendix was removed. You see, I had tonsillitis and no one listened to me.
I had a GP claim. The abdominal pain I had was because 4 months prior I had a few drinks at my friend's birthday. 2 years later, diagnosed with Crohn's, which has been incredibly difficult to manage.
When I was younger, from 7 to 10, I would get constant headaches, ranging from usually pretty mild to excruciating pain. I was taken to the doctor multiple times and was told it was due to hitting the ball with my head too many times, as I played soccer for 4 different teams and would have a practice or game at least every day, sometimes 3 times a day. I remember one headache that felt like my brains was going to explode, and my parents, having trusted the doctors, told me that I just had to suck it up. Around 5 years later, I found out I had a kidney disease which caused me to have high blood pressure even if I ate what is normally recommended. And they explained that my headaches were caused to my untreated illness. That itself isn't too scary. What's scary is that about a year ago, my brother, who has the same disease, goes to the hospital because of a headache which he described as, "My brain is about to explode," and he was taken to the hospital where they found he had popped a blood vessel in his brain and needed immediate surgery or he would die. That could have been little 8-year-old me.
Back in 2008, my dad was just not feeling right and hadn't been for a long time. After 2 weeks of tests, they told us he had aggressive lymphoma and needed chemo urgently, and he'd be lucky to have another year. One of the doctors who had run some of these tests disagreed with his colleagues and refused to sign off on the chemo. This was on a Friday, and they wanted my dad to start chemo the next Monday. Well, the doctor who wouldn't sign off was right. He ran some more tests and proved my dad was just celiac. 16 years later, he's still with us, living his best gluten-free life.
Getting a biopsy to confirm celiac on me next week. I could absolutely see how this would get mistaken for lymphoma. I feel like shit and my symptoms all line up perfectly with early stage lymphoma.
Thank you so much for watching. In the comments below the video, write your similar stories. And don't forget to watch our other videos. Bye.